Hello everyone, it's Scott, and we're back with Magic the Gathering Foundation spoilers for Halloween, and we've got some very interesting cards to get to today. But before we do, remember to like and subscribe to get further preview videos like this in upcoming sets and throughout Foundation spoiler season. So let's dive into today's spoilers. So again, we're only looking at new cards in these because we're getting so many reprints that in terms of time, it's just more efficient for me to deal with the new cards. But the first one we've got today is Bolt Wave. For 1 red mana, you get a sorcery, and Bolt Wave deals 3 damage to each opponent. So this isn't Lightning Bolt, but it's pretty close. I mean, it is at sorcery speed, but I think red decks will want to play this, and this is going to make a red burn deck much more possible in Standard than it has been probably since we were back in Dominaria. Next, we've got Zimone, Paradox Sculptor. For 2 and a green and a blue mana, you get a legendary creature that's a human wizard and is a 1/4. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. And for a green and a blue mana, you can tap Zimone and double the number of each kind of counter on up to 2 target creatures and or artifacts that you control. So this is a very powerful card. It is 4 mana, so it'll be a little harder to get out, but in the mid game, you got some smaller creatures on the field, you cast Zimone, and Zimone every combat is going to start growing those. And if you've got extra mana laying around, then Zimone can go ahead and start doubling counters on creatures or artifacts, and I think that's good enough to see Standard play. Next, we've got Raise the Pass. For 2 and 2 white mana, you get a sorcery, and return all creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is a great spell for tribal decks. A lot of the tribal decks that we're seeing currently in Standard, whether it's humans or lizards, what they're playing are mostly 2 mana spells or less. So this is a great card in the late game for those decks. I can see a couple copies of this being in those decks if you're playing against a deck that's using a lot of spot removal, that isn't exiling your creature. So this is definitely, I feel, like a sideboard card in those decks, because it would be great to just get all your stuff back and then go ahead and attack in and hopefully win the game. Next, we've got Kiora, the Rising Tide. For 2 and a blue mana, you get a legendary creature that's a Merfolk Noble and is a 3/2. And when Kiora enters the battlefield, you get to draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. So it helps with graveyard strategies. And Kiora also has Threshold. Whenever Kiora attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may create Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8 blue octopus creature token. So really powerful card here. We know that Kiora is one of our Despark planeswalkers, and basically in a graveyard strategy where you're trying to get things into your graveyard, Kiora can become, a top-end finisher almost if you reach that threshold. So I think Threshold as a new ability in Foundations, I think is going to actually have a chance of having a decent deck built around the strategy. Next, we've got Drake Hatcher. For 1 and a blue mana, you get a human wizard. That's a 1/3 with vigilance and prowess. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, put that many incubation counters on it. And you can remove 3 incubation counters from this creature and create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. So I think this is actually a good, very good Magic card. Now, right now, we're not seeing a lot of blue creatures being played in Standard, but Drake Hatcher has prowess, which you are going to be able to use to go ahead and increase the power and toughness of Drake Hatcher. So you're likely to hit for 2 or 3 damage when Drake Hatcher gets damaged through. So not going to say that every turn you're going to be able to create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying, but I think you're going to be able to do this regularly. And because of that, I think this is definitely going to be a card that, people who are trying to play prowess decks in blue are going to want to try in those decks. Next, we've got High Society Hunter for 3 and 2 black mana. You get a Vampire Noble. That's a 5/3 with flying. Whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever another non-token creature dies, you get to draw a card. So, again, we've talked about the fact that we probably have a vampire deck that will be viable based on what we're seeing in Foundations. And I think this is a nice top-end card for that deck because you're going to be able to sacrifice things. So, this could be an aristocrat-style deck that you're using. And that ability to just get cards for sacrificing stuff, that's not a, ability that you want to discount in Standard, because black really does want as much card draw as possible to get an advantage. So High Society Hunter, I think, is definitely going to be a playable Magic card because of the card draw ability on it. Next, we've got Abysmal Harvester for 1 and 2 black mana. You get a Demon Warlock. That's a 3/2. And you can tap it and exile target creature card from a graveyard that was put there this turn. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. Then exile all other nightmare tokens you control. So Abysmal Harvester, on rate here, it's a good Magic card no matter what, because it's a demon and it's only 3 mana, and we know we have Unholy Annex in Standard, so I think this is definitely going to see Standard play because it fits into the Unholy Annex deck with, just kind of a plug-and-play card for that deck. But that ability to, maybe you lose your Archfiend of the Dross, or you lose one of your Bloodletters of Aklazad, okay, and you can tap this and get it back, and I think that's a really powerful ability in Standard once you're doing those kinds of things with Abysmal Harvester. Next, we've got Blasphemous Edict for 3 and 2 black mana. You get a sorcery, and you may pay a black mana rather than pay this spell's mana cost if there are 13 or more creatures on the battlefield, and each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. So this is a card that is a board wipe in black for 5 mana. You may occasionally be able to only pay 1 mana for this, but 5 mana for a black board wipe is a good rate in Standard, so I think this will see some amount of play. Devious Cover-Up, which is another 5 mana black board wipe, is already seeing play in Standard, so I think this will see some play as well. Next, we've got Sylvan Scavenging for 1 and 2 green mana. You get an enchantment, and at the beginning of your end step, choose one. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, or create a 3/3 green raccoon creature token if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So this could be literally every turn. If you've got a 4 power creature, you get to put another 3/3 onto the battlefield, and I think that's good enough in Standard to be a card that is considered to be played. And Sylvan Scavenging is going to build up a creature to that eventually, no matter what happens, unless your opponent is able to remove all of your creatures. So I think in the right green build, and probably it goes in a +1/+1 counter deck, but I think that's good enough to see Standard play. Alright, now we got a few lower rarity cards from the day to talk about. The first is Jou Through for 1 white mana. Jou Through deals 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, and you gain 1 life. Yeah, it's a nice white removal spell, combat trick that your opponent can use or you can use to take out a creature in combat, and I think that's certainly a good enough card to play in Standard. Next, we've got Rune Sealed Wall for 2 and a blue mana. You get an artifact creature that's a wall. It has Defender and is a 0/6, and you can tap it to surveil 1. Now, probably not going to see a lot of Standard play, but in a deck that really wants to shape the top of their deck, I can see Rune Sealed Wall, being a copy or two to really create a blocker that your opponent's going to have a hard time, battling through. It's not going to kill anything, but what it will do is make it very difficult for your opponent, smaller creatures, to get through for combat damage. Next, we've got Dragon Trainer for 3 and 2 red mana. You get a human, that's a 1/1. And when this creature enters the battlefield, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So 5 mana, get a 1/1 and a 4/4. Decent card in limited, but I don't think it's going to see standard play. Next, we've got Strongbox Raider for 2 and 2 red mana. You get an Orc Pirate, that's a 5/2 with Raid. And when this creature enters the battlefield, if you attack this turn, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So, 4 mana to get a 5/2, maybe a little underpowered on the toughness side here, but if you attack that turn, you do get to look at the top 2 cards of your library and choose one of them, and you get to play that until the end of your next turn. So it's not a terrible Magic card, but certainly I don't think it's probably standard playable, but definitely a card I would want to put in a deck in limited. Alright, and our last card of the day is Fiendish Panda for 2, a white and a black mana. You get a Bear Demon, that's a 3/2. And whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then when this creature dies, return another target non-bear creature card with mana value less than or equal to this creature's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So 4 mana for this is, definitely, it's underpowered for 4 mana, but if it's in a life gain deck and you can put a number of +1/+1 counters on it, you're going to be able to pretty much get any card back from your graveyard that you want that's a creature when you do that. And again, it also has an important creature type that it's a demon. Okay, and that could mean you're getting an Archfiend of the Dross back or a Bloodletter of Akhlazad back when this does die. And I think, right now we know the demon decks are mostly going to be blue-black, but maybe you push into white and do some life gain stuff that way, and Fiendish Panda becomes one of the cards that's going to help Unholy Annex proc every turn for you and deal damage to your opponent and gain you some life. Alright, those are the new cards from Foundations, from Overnight, and I think we've got some very playable cards here, and I think deck builders will see them as some very good options in Standard. I've put a couple of preview videos up here for some of the other things that I've done over the course of the week. So take a look at those, and remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on what your favorite card was of the day. Thanks. I'll see you next time.